Good morning, comrades. You are listening to WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. This is your weekly Good Morning Comrade at our brand new exciting time, Mondays at 10 a.m. Joining us today, we have the man, the myth, the legend, the doctor, Markalain Dery. What is up, my brother? Welcome back.
Thank you. I just want to I want you to tell the story of the text you sent me on Monday a.m. Monday at 9:03 Central a.m.
Oh,
Tell the
yeah.
story. Tell the
Okay.
story of
So-
the text message you sent me.
So I got to wind it up. So I had a guest on. It was her first time ever on the radio. It's if you actually listen back to our last episode, it is with she's actually an amazing blind artist and retired cosplayer, and now she's a content creator. Her name is Lisa. Lisa is learning on Twitch. If ever want to follow her, I highly recommend it. She's like a real sweetheart. She's a blind artist who is like she does a lot of digital art these days. And she does political commentary on Twitch. But anyway, I did not know that we were getting moved on Saturday. So like I'm telling her to listen to and by the way, Saturday
was Saturday. It was Saturday.
So the story starts on Saturday. Okay. Saturday was her birthday. And it was supposed to be her debut on the radio. So I'm like, oh, yes, you can tune in on Saturday and it's going to be your birthday and all this stuff. And so so she's tuning in live on her stream on Twitch and it's like something else.
On the WH. So she's doing a live Twitch stream so she tunes into WHIV.
Yeah. And so like I'm like texting with you and I'm texting with Kyle and it's like, oh, you got moved to Mondays. And she was a really great sport about it. She was like, okay, we'll just tune in on Monday. So like
which is something that I announced on this show like 6 months ago when I was like,
but it didn't happen until literally forever. Right, yeah, it didn't happen until like the week where I'm like, listen to yourself on the radio this day on your birthday. So anyway, so Monday rolls around and I live in Virginia now, right? So things are a little bit different. It was supposed to be 10 o'clock.
Like the time zones.
Yes. It's the Eastern time zone. So I text Markalain because I said, hey, tune in at 10 o'clock, tune in. And so like I'm listening myself. I didn't even tell her to tune in. Like I was going to wait until I confirmed that she was on the air before. And so at like 9:03, I'm like texting Markalain. I was like, what the hell, man? Like, why are we not on the radio? What's going on? And he's like, bro, it's 9 o'clock. And I'm like, oh no.
I'm like, dude, it's 10 Eastern. You're on at 10 Central. And I'm like in the middle, like I'm like sitting, like I've got patient charts in front of me. Like I'm in the hospital. I'm like in deep, serious, like I'm concentrating. And I get a text from Jeff and he's like, dude, how come my show's not on? And I'm like,
and I was not trying to be a jerk about it.
No, of course you weren't. Of course. And I did not mean to imply that you were. But I was like deep in like hospital doctor
mode. You were
in
doctor mode.
I was in super doctor mode. And all of a sudden I'm like looking at my phone and I'm trying to process. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, oh, this MFer, he probably thinks that. I'm like, let me just see if that's what it is. So I just typed out, dude, it's, you're on, it's 9 a.m. Central. You're on at 10 a.m. Central. Mm-hmm. And then I didn't hear back. And then you were like, oh, duh, whatever.
Silly me. I said, silly me.
So, and then I didn't hear back. So at like 10:04, I checked my text messages and I realized I didn't hear back from you. So I haven't, we're doing this live, so I don't know.
We'll do it live. It worked. Yes.
I'm assuming it went.
It went. It did. It was perfect. It went fine, and it was fun. But she actually said, and this is super cute, that her mom listened to it, and that her mom said she did great on the radio.
That's great. That's great. I'm sure she has a great voice for radio, and I'm sure she has great
viewers. And again, like if you're interested in tuning into her content, you can find her on Twitch. twitch.tv / Lisa is learning. She's a lot of fun. She's also, you can look at her old cosplays as well, which she was very prolific as a cosplayer.
Again,
She like dressed up as like characters from like cartoons and video games and stuff, comic books.
Right, got it. Yeah,
that's
like that's like super uber nerd stuff, right?
Yeah, but Lisa, look her up, Lisa Lou Who on Instagram.
All right, I'll definitely check it out.
Anyway, welcome to the show, Markalain, Dery. How are you doing today?
Yes, I'm okay. I'm okay. I just finished 8 days straight in the hospital. It's very, very brutal.
You weren't in the hospital in the bed. You were being a doctor.
Right. I was on the other side of the bed. I was, Jeff, there's a lot to talk about. I don't even know where to start. I mean, I know that we're talking about Imperial Health Boomerang today, but as a segue into it, let me just also say, as I'm, you and I, just as kind of for people who know or don't know, WHIV was a station that I started 11 years ago. You've been a DJ, or you've had a show on WHIV for like 9 years.
7 years. We make 7 years this month.
7 years this month. Congratulations. And thank you for all that you've done for WHIV. We're rearranging things. We're moving things around.
My pleasure, dude. It has been such a great experience being at WHIV the entire time, like for real.
I have to say, and this is something that Liana reminds me about, my wife, who's the co-founder of WHIV, reminds me. And we use you as an example. Jenny Yanez, who's a local activist, an example, is that WHIV has birthed these activist careers of people that we just liked, and we were like, here's a show on an FM radio station. Oh, what? You've never done radio before? Perfect. You're the one that we want. That's exactly what we want. And, it's been wonderful to kind of see these kind of side careers, these side hustles that people have been able to make for themselves that have been so prolific. And you've been definitely one of those people. So it's been great having you as part of our WHIV family. So I guess the first place to start is just like how busy the hospitals are right now. And what I want to remind people is that if you're a young, and by young, I mean 28, 29, 30, 31-year-old physician, right? I'm 58, okay? But if you're a young 30-year-old physician, let's say, who just finished residency, let's say in internal medicine, in surgery or whatever, pediatrics, why would you move yourself and your family? Like, what physician would move herself and her family down to a state or states that don't allow for her to have her own reproductive choices, right? Why would she move her family down here? And now you can take a physician and just use that as an avatar for attorney. What young attorney is going to move herself and her family down to Louisiana, to New Orleans? If she looks at the state house that Jeff can attest to, at the grotesque whiteness of these fat old white dudes who basically run the state, despite the state having far more diversity in terms of gender, of color, of religion, of party affiliation. It's 30%, 30%, 30% Republican, Democrat, and independents, but it's like 80 or 90% Republican due to laws and suppression and all that. But all of this to say is that as a physician and as a senior physician in this state, it's really hard because we are not seeing new doctors moving down here. And it's part of this overall brain drain. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe you know this, or maybe you shared this with me, I don't know, but maybe 6 months ago, weren't we sharing something with one each other? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm making this up, that Louisiana had the biggest brain drain in the union in the past year or so. Does that sound vaguely familiar?
Yeah, it does sound familiar. I don't have specifics sort of in the breach for that, but I mean, I didn't leave because I left because of a certain specific job myself, but I was a school teacher here, and school teachers.
I mean, I don't want to say you're an example of it, but you kind of are.
Well, whatever. That's not as important as the sort of broader perspective of there are I mean, historically speaking, I guess you could say push and pull migration factors that have existed throughout the entirety of history. And I would say that some of the dynamics that you just mentioned, the ability for somebody or the inability for somebody to even have the basic autonomy over their lives and their own bodies would be a significant push factor, I suppose, for a lot of people, not for everybody, but
And also, if you care about civil rights and social justice, do you want to talk about the Supreme Court ruling that came down today that was Louisiana, and Louisiana is going to be the imprint of this for the rest of the states? If you want to explain it, please go ahead.
Let me set this up really quickly, because it's sort of funny that this is happening in both Virginia, which is the state that I currently live in, and in Louisiana, the state that I grew up in for 30, almost 40 years of my life. So in Virginia, there was just an election for the redistricting of the maps to have them be sort of redrawn in a fairly partisan way that would benefit Democrats, I guess you could say, which is something that is not uncommon for Republicans to do. This is something that the Republicans have been doing for a generation. And this is the Democrats' first opportunity I've ever seen for them to push back. And it had to be this happened on Tuesday of last week. That would be the 21st of April, 2026, the year of our Lord, 2026. Anni Domini, common era, as some people might say. But by Wednesday, there was already a ruling by I want to say, state court to stop the implementation of those new districts. Pause right there.
That's because the amendment or whatever it was won. It was a tight. It was 52 to 48, but it won. The idea was they voted. The people of Virginia voted to redistrict to gerrymander, really more than anything else. This is what it's called, the state, so that there would be more seats, thereby offsetting the gerrymandering that happened in Texas, essentially.
Correct. Which is happening in other states. Fast forward literally 1 week, and I find out this literally from you. When I wake up this morning, I get a text from you.
Really? Was it?
And
from
you're
me,
like,
really?
yeah. You broke the news to me about the Supreme Court, and this is the headline from The Guardian. U.S. Supreme Court, quote, demolishes Voting Rights Act, gutting provision that prevented racial discrimination. Now, I do want to say this, and this is the stuff that really is gonna drive me crazy when the Democrats could do their half measure to stop it. So they didn't officially repeal the Voting Rights Act. They just repealed all the no. They're not going to do that. They just repealed all the stuff in the Voting Rights Act that means anything, that protects anything, that does anything. But technically, I guess in terms of the letter of the law, law nerds can say the Voting Rights Act still exists or whatever. So now what we're going to get, and this is essentially the ruling before I get into that. The ruling is essentially that they're going to redraw the districts in Louisiana again to eliminate districts that have been more differently demographically represented, that were spoken out, literally articulated in the Voting Rights Act.
So, right. Okay. So let me just kind of
because racism is over, by the way. That's why.
Nikki Haley. Remember Nikki Haley said there was no racism in the U.S.
There's only one kind of racism, and it's racism against white people, apparently.
Of course, let me, if you don't mind, let me just kind of add a little to that.
Go for it.
What happened was the original law was that a state, and again, for lawyer nerds, whatever, forgive me, I will get deep.
He's a doctor.
Medical.
He's not a lawyer.
Right.
Okay.
I'm going to get deep. I'm going to get deep into medicine here in a moment. So, let me be wrong or inaccurate. But there was a law.
He's doing his best. Okay. He's doing his best.
There was a law, whatever, an amendment, something in the state of Louisiana that made it seem as though, or that the idea was that there was one district of like, I think 7 that we have here, in which was black,
Second district,
and it was coded. And if you look at it, it's this crazy line that goes from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, and it captures these river districts where is mostly populated by African American. And it just basically, if you look at where black people live in Louisiana, that's the circle that they made between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. It is the most awkward looking district, but it put a person of color into, and they have for decades put people of color into the that district has been represented by people of color.
You know what's funny is about this too, by the way, is that like I hate Cedric Richmond. And I hate like most of these corporate Democrats that end up
all they are. They're
occupying this seat. But like at the same time, like it exists in that way for a reason. You know,
right. Well, I think, in the end, it's safe for Republicans because they're just going to put a corporate Democrat there anyway.
Yeah. Well, I guess what my point is that like it's Troy Carter now that occupies that seat. He's a relatively, I guess, by the standards of like most of people in Congress, I guess, fairly, at least in terms of lip service, pro-labor Democrat, heavy scare quotes and asterisks all the way down it, but he's a corporate Democrat, right? So like he's not even my favorite, but he is somebody who is at least representative of a part of the state. And that's what I'm trying to make clear here, is that like you can't even have that. You can't even have a black corporate Democrat.
Right. Okay. So what happened was
you need to have a what?
Right. So what happened was that there was a group of voters who were kind of they consisted of a black constituency that actually sued the state, or I'm sure they sued. And what came from it was that they wanted a second district drawn that would allow for more black representation in short from the state of Louisiana.
The terminology they typically use is a second majority minority district is what they use technically.
So forgive my
no.
I'm a bull in a China shop. So
that's it. I'm just talking about how the nerds talk about it.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Okay. So a second majority minority district, is that how you said?
That's how they say it, yes.
Okay. So it got challenged after the law, and they actually the lawmakers actually went and redrew the maps, and it would have been significant for the 2020, I think the 2020 election, right? 2020. Where are we? We're no 2020.
It's 2020. It's 2026 right now.
It's 2020. So I think it would have been relevant for the 2024 election, right? It would have been relevant for the 2024 election. And it got stayed immediately. As soon as it passed, it was challenged and it was stayed. In other words, they said you can't do anything, and it got bumped up to the Supreme Court in the 2025 year, and then it got booted. That's something that's never heard, where they said we're not gonna comment on this. We're gonna push this to next year. And again, for my attorney lawyer nerds, forgive me for kind of bluntly describing this. Essentially, what the Supreme Court essentially said was, we want you to go back, relitigate this in the next cycle, but we want you to focus specifically on these elements of the Voting Rights Act. And they did. And the people who did that were I don't know how they would phrase themselves. Jeff, help me out. They were the non-minority. Essentially, it was just like the black voters and the white voters, right? And that
I don't think there's a better way to put it. I don't think there's a cleaner way to put it than that.
And it was the white voters who were like, and and Jeff was telegraphing this a moment ago. These MFers were like, oh, we feel like we are being put upon. We feel like racism is acting on us, and we should not. These are the guys that made the maps to begin with, that carved out that one black section, and they were like, oh, what are we going to do? We feel as though that this is being made up and it's excluding white people, and we don't think that should be the case. And it was that the Supreme Court ruled upon today. And ultimately, I think what Jeff was saying. I think this is going to ultimately gut the Voting Rights Act.
Well,
And I guess what you were saying, sorry, let me just finish off with this.
yeah, finish it.
It's just gonna be called the VRA in name only. It's not gonna have any teeth whatsoever.
Not just that. And this is the thing that's gonna like make me lose my mind, because like I'm sure that there is something that is remaining in this sort of like corpse of tremendously impactful legislation that took place in the midst of like what was probably the closest thing that we've had to a social revolution in this country's in the last since the Civil War, I guess you could say, right? The Voting Rights Act was something that was so transformational that it changed the political map and realigned like most people in like the way that politics is done in the United States. For the better or for worse is, take your pick. But it gave people who did not have a voice prior to this moment a voice. And what I think is going to happen, because I know the Democrats and I know how they operate, and obviously I'm not going to be like a Jimmy Dore and be like, this is why you got to get Trump to win or whatever, or get more. This is why we need to support Tucker Carlson or any kind of thing crazy like that. But the way that Democrats are going to talk about this is that whatever husk that is remaining of this Voting Rights Act, which was just completely and utterly destroyed, the cadaver of the Voting Rights Act, they're going to essentially say that if you don't vote for Gavin Newsom or Pete Buttigieg or some like corporate POS Democrat or whatever it is, then you don't care about the Voting Rights Act or anything it ever stood for at any point. And that's how they're going to essentially try to discipline and get away from any kind of, dude, I'm so ticked off at Democrats right now. Like I am thinking of like a couple of weeks ago when Donald Trump is saying that, hey, we're going to glass Iran in, primetime television. We're going to destroy an entire civilization. And you have United States senators like Alyssa Slotkin from Michigan saying like, oh, you know what? We got to do something about this Hassan Piker, who is who is like being Hassan kind of anti-Semitic, don't you think? Like just today. And I'm sorry, I'm like going like way afield on this. This is how pathetic Democrats are. The Voting Rights Act was gutted today. There was a Democrat, Josh Gottheimer, and Mike Lawler, who is like a super racist Republican, who basically
in New York, right?
They both introduced bipartisan legislation today, or a resolution for the Congress to denounce Hassan Piker and Candace Owens. It's the craziest thing. On the day the Voting Rights Act got, and not just that. This is why I feel like I'm an insane person talking about this. They scuttled a war powers resolution, a way to essentially check the United States, like the executive branch and their imperial war in Iran that they just dropped on everybody like a month ago. And they said, you know what? We could pass that, kick that can down the road. What we have to really address right here is not the war that is happening in Iran that we started for no reason, that is making your gas prices over $4 right now. We need to denounce Hassan Piker.
No, listen.
Like, I feel like I'm a crazy person saying this. You know what I mean? The fact that it's real.
No, 100%. So a couple things. One is, and I really do want to talk about measles. Like measles. We'll get to the measles. Measles is so much more important. Okay, because it actually is just predictable, right? So a couple things. These these people are basically, they're bought and sold. Yeah. I mean, that's it. They just basically are told what to do by their corporate, or their donors. And that's what it comes down to. It's just that we need to get money out of politics, and nothing says more. I mean, when the Democrats are like, we need our own Joe Rogan, and here's a Hassan Piker who's able to speak truth to power and reach out to hundreds of thousands of millions of people like what, the number one Twitch streamer? Like the
number one left political Twitch streamer, I guess you could say. He has 30,000 people in his chat every single day, which is crazy.
And so
that's like a football stadium,
right? So when they say they want a Joe Rogan, let's be clear. The Joe Rogan they want is the Joe Rogan who aligns perfectly with their political donors, right? So that means AIPAC. Like you can't say anything about Israel, right? Mm-hmm. You cannot say anything about Gaza and a genocide. You cannot be talking about these sorts of things, like, without any sort of political repercussion. And this is what's happening.
I don't know, Markalain, you're sounding kind of anti-Semitic right now. You sound like Hassan Piker.
I know. And you know what they're going to call me? They're going to call myself, like, what do they call, like,
self-hating Jew or whatever?
Self-hating Jew. There you go. I'm a self-hating Jew, right? Like, it's Jesus. Oh yeah. Anyway,
let's use this as our opportunity to segue it.
Okay.
The virus, the disease is what?
Well, I mean,
money in politics.
Yes, it's money. There's no
capitalism is the disease, baby.
What
capitalism is the disease.
Like, I mean, like, look how. It's so funny. Like, because now I've been watching corporate. Like, I've been watching corporate news, just because I was getting so to the left, and like I was just like, I need a little bit of. By corporate news, I'm just talking about MS now, right? Like, I'm not talking
or like CNN or whatever,
right, or Fox or anything. So like the furthest right I will go will be to MSN every once in a while, right?
Which is terrible, by the way, which is awful.
Of course it is. Okay, of course it is. But it's so funny when they talk about, oh, this money that's going to the wars, and we're spending 1.5 billion or blah 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 per day or whatever, whereas that money could be used otherwise. I'm like, really? Like, really? Like, you tell me, bitch, please. Like, you tell me how all of a sudden we're going to stop spending money on war, and what? We're going to expand Medicaid, or like all of a sudden Medicare for all, or all of a sudden we're going to start like pumping money into schools and paying teachers what they're worth. Like,
Social Security is secure forever.
Like,
Medicaid, Medicare.
Right. Like, and these, like, and listen, these are well-meaning, privileged journalists and
definitely
privileged journalists, and there are those that like care, and they have a heart, whatever, but they found themselves in their world and they're going to protect their status and all that stuff, and I recognize that. But when they talk about this idea,
of all the people that wouldn't curse on the radio, I'd hope it would be you.
I was close.
I love you, brother.
I was hoping you didn't hear that. Speaking of which,
well, I have to hear it because I had to clean it up for the airwaves.
Oh, good. So I could drop S words then, and then you'll go back and edit it out.
I mean, if you want to give me more work, and I'll make it an obnoxious sound, like a big staticky sound.
I will not do that.
What station are we on? And
you are. If you are tuning in, you are tuned in to 102.3 WHIVLP FM in New Orleans. We are community radio dedicated to human rights and social justice. WHIVFM.org, Human Rights and Social Justice Radio. We are not a radio station with a mission. We are a mission with the radio station, and that is to end all wars.
Yeah, so that's why I bring you on the show more than any other reason. Is because you do that better than me.
So, all right. So let's use that as a segue. So I reached out to you last week because I actually had two publications. I gave you the first editorial. I didn't give you the second one, and we'll get into that in just a second if you don't mind. And so the first editorial that I wrote 6 months ago. The other one I wrote was 3 years ago. It took me 3 years to get an editorial published, but I'll explain to you why. It's because I was challenging the medical system. And you know what the medical system doesn't like? Is
being
when
challenged.
And I submitted it to a major medical journal who made me go through dozens of editorials. Anyway,
they put you through the ringer.
They put me through the ringer, and they kept saying, tone it down. And every time I saw tone it down, I specifically said to them, right. I specifically said to them, I'm going to tone it up. And I did. And I will tell you, what I submitted what I submitted 3 years ago and what was published this past weekend was way more toned up because I will tell you this, the main editor who was referring me, I know he wanted to see it published, and I know I don't want to give anyway. All right. So
we like this guy, whoever he is.
The first article that I did was something called the Imperial Health Boomerang. And
which we have discussed on this program, by the way. We have discussed
right. So we've talked about this thing that I have kind of I've phrased or so. Let me first tell you about the Imperial Boomerang, and then let's get into the Imperial Health Boomerang. So, and then let's talk about what it has to do with this article, which is what we're going to see with Medicaid cuts coming down the line. Okay. So the Imperial, all right, let me just personalize this and say, I went to UC Santa Cruz. So I started at UC Santa Cruz in 1986. I was a
Banana Slug.
Before it was Banana Slugs, they were the California Sea Lions. And we came in as the California Sea Lions. But while we were there, they changed. They were like, hey guys, the California Sea Lions is very muscular. How about if we go to the Banana Slugs? And all of us were like, yes!
You nerds. I love it.
So at that time, UCSC was 3,000 people, just to give you an idea. Now it's like 20,000 or 25,000. Yeah. But it was a very, very small university at the time. It was a great intellectual. It was a great place for me to go. There was no grades. There was no frats. There was no athletics. There was no nothing. It was real nerds. There was no calling your professors by professor or doctor. They all went by their first names. We all had our classes outside. I swear to God, it was cool. It was awesome. California dreaming. Like for a boy who grew up in Los Angeles, I needed UC Santa Cruz, right? Anyway, so everybody would walk around with these books by Hannah Arendt or Michel Foucault, right? And they were basically right. So they were all these and like in UC Santa Cruz, if you were walking around with a Michel Foucault or like a Hannah Arendt, like the Hannah Arendt book, that meant that you understood
life. It'll get you laid.
Right. Well, I didn't want to say that. But anyway. So all right. So anyway, so Michel Foucault and Hannah Arendt were basically proteges, or at least intellectual proteges of God bless it. I just had it in my head right now. The person who first came up with this idea of an Imperial Boomerang, he was I think Saint Martinican, Caribbean gentleman, intellectual. His name just popped right out of my head. Jeff, if you're looking it up, I appreciate it. And so, yeah, Césaire, right. Émile Césaire, thank you, Émile Césaire. And so an intellectual, and what he did is he kind of came up with this notion of countries that colonize, so imperial countries that colonize other countries, the military or the very aggressive tactics that occur in those countries will eventually boomerang back to the so-called motherland. And he quoted this idea of something called the Imperial Boomerang. And what happened was that Michel Foucault and Hannah Arendt went on to kind of use examples of Césaire's kind of ideas. And so the best example I can give you is when you look at what happened with Rene Good or Alex Prede, right? Alex Prede in Minneapolis. What you see are examples of an imperial boomerang. You could see things like that happening.
Which essentially is just sorry to cut you off. It's essentially please. Military tactics that are used in countries that your country is actively colonizing, and then as a way to stamp down on dissent internally, those exact same tactics are applied to your own people, to that country's own people. So it basically comes to the point where the imperial forces come sort of like an identity upon themselves, where they essentially apply the same tactics on their colonial subjects to their
citizens,
their own citizens. Yes,
right, to their own citizens, 100%. So that's referred to as the Imperial Boomerang, and this is something again. that I learned about when I was in college and had a vague understanding of as a college student would, but then went off to medical school and residency and whatever, and I didn't really think much about it, right? And then what happened was we when Trump V2 took place, and what we saw was the so-called Doge and Elon Musk that went through and started to do these very, very drastic cuts. And the first cuts that he did internationally was with USAID and PEPFAR. Just for everybody to recognize, USAID was this incredible yet flawed. I know this show, i.e., one other host, had a lot of criticisms about USAID that were appropriate, because a lot of USAID was used for soft power, and Robert has a very disciplined kind of vision of this is stuff that manipulates other countries to do stuff that the U.S. wants, and we shouldn't be using healthcare as a mechanism for that. And I 100% agree with him. There's no question about it. But the bottom line was that USAID did save millions of lives, and had saved millions and millions and millions and millions of lives. And
which, by the way, I don't think Robert would argue with you on that point either.
I don't think he would either. We were basically taking two approaches.
You were exploring the concept of USAID and from multiple perspectives, which I think is a complete conversation. Which is
as a physician, as an infectious disease doctor, and as somebody who does international health, USAID is the boat that I float in. Like that's
exactly
that. Like I have done work for other countries using other countries' government services. And let me just be clear about that. All industrialized countries have a version of USAID. It's true that the USAID's was a very strong one and did provide a lot of quote unquote soft power. Now, PEPFAR, which was the George Bush version of providing HIV access around the world, especially to resource poor countries, was, and given the situation we're in right now, doesn't Bush just seem so like you almost want to
Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it.
You just want to
okay. First off, okay, no. They tortured some folks. Those paintings, by the way, are terrible.
I know.
Those paintings, I think, actually, probably George Bush's greatest war crime. You can take it down. Quote me later. His greatest war crime are those paintings. They're terrible.
But what he did do was establish a line of credit or monies that went to people living with HIV.
Correct.
And as difficult, and I've long since swallowed this difficult pill, bitter pill, to admit, and I do this publicly all the time, that one of the greatest presidents in the United States for HIV was George Bush. Now, I think it was a happy accident.
No, regardless.
I don't think he was like, one day he's like, I'm going to help the people of Africa and Thailand. I think it was just a happy effing accident. That's all it was.
And quite frankly, it doesn't matter what his intentions were. And contradictions, and this is something that I've gotten myself to be comfortable with over time, contradictions are all over this world, and they surround every single part of every single thing that we consume and we live with, through, and around every single day. So multiple things can be true. George Bush can be Satan himself, and also he could have been unwell for HIV. You know what I mean?
Also, these Republicans drive me crazy sometimes, because they are some of the worst people in the world. But then all of a sudden, 10 years later, another horrible worse Satan appears, and then they're like, look, my reputation has been cleansed now.
Yeah.
Because there's somebody's worse than me, right?
You didn't realize that there was an even greater Satan out there, was there?
Right. Yeah.
You got you.
The people in the addiction always say there's always a low below the low that you know, right? There's always a low below the low that you know. Anyway, okay. So what happened was that the evil Satan himself, disgusting human being, excuse for a carbon bag, Elon Musk, goes through and without any justification completely creates these cuts in USAID and PEPFAR.
Mhm.
And what we are seeing now are, and the projection in 2030 is something like 20 million deaths. Probably 2/3 of that are going to be children. Like what the lives that and the pain that we are already seeing. There's a New York Times. I'm not a big New York Times person, blah, 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 whatever. But there's a journalist there named Christoph, and
The
I can't remember his
failing
last
New York
name.
Times. The failing New York
Yeah,
Times.
failing New York Times, terrible ratings, New York Times. Anyway, he's documenting his articles are very hard to read. But the idea is that what we are seeing internationally is brutal. They're very, very hard articles to read. We're seeing a lot of now women are being less protected as a result of loss of USAID PEPFAR monies. And so we're seeing more sexual violence. Of course, we're seeing HIV transmission because people's viral loads are not undetectable. And of course, everything that USAID, malaria, it's been horrible. Okay.
Mhm.
And so what I then went ahead and did after the so-called big beautiful bill was passed was write this article about what I referred to as the Imperial Health Boomerang. And it's this notion, and in the article that I wrote, and please reach out to reach out to info@whivfm.org. Again, info@whivfm.org if you're interested, and I will be happy to send you the link for this article, or maybe you can put it in the show notes as well.
I can definitely do that.
And so what I did was I opened up the article about a patient that I've taken care of for about 20 years. His name was Ramon. Ramon is a Honduran man. And as Jeff can tell you better than anybody else can, that the links between New Orleans and Honduras is very, very strong. Done by the banana boats, what was it, Dole?
Yeah.
And before Dole, it was the Imperial banana
that.
colonizing Honduran company. I don't know what it was called.
Well, not just that, like even like in modern days, like when I was a school teacher, I would have, and this was, I mean, again, I would have a kid in my class. I would have kids in my class from Honduras and El Salvador. I would have Garifuna kids, and I would have
which is a big deal. A Garifuna is a big deal.
I would have there's a strong population of Garifuna kids in Kenner, and like I've actually felt like I was overwhelmed a lot of times with some of these guys because like one of them who speaks like English, Spanish, and Garifuna, but he was dyslexic, so he had like trouble reading, and he felt like he was somehow inadequate or stupid or whatever because he couldn't read or something like bro, you speak 3 languages. I speak one.
Of them,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, one of them is likely to be extinct, which is the Garifuna language.
I hope not.
Which,
I
hope not. This is the Eastern. These are Hondurans.
It's an indigenous culture. They're in their fabulous culture. Like all of the folks that have ever
with the highest rates of HIV. They have the highest rates of HIV there.
I'm not surprised, but they were so tight and so cool, and they're so resilient and awesome. Like I know it sounds like I'm being condescending white guy or whatever, and I'm not trying to do like the romanticism, but like I don't know, like they had things that we kind of don't have in like modern mainstream culture. I'm not even gonna say like white culture or whatever, but like they actually understand family and community much more than is happening here, just because of the atomization that is sort of like prevalent in the mainstream culture. Sorry to like get on my soapbox for half a second, but we need to get to our station identification. Markalain.
You are listening to 102.3 WHIV FM LP in New Orleans, Louisiana. We are community radio dedicated to human rights, social justice. WHIVFM.org. We honor independent voices. This is not a radio station with a mission. This is a mission with a radio station, and that is to end all wars. Thank you for tuning in. This is Good Morning Comrades. Your host is over there, Jeff, who took a swig of beer, while my name is Markalain Dery. Thank you for having me.
This is apple juice.
Let me finish. Oh, right. It's apple juice. I forgot. Yeah, we're on air. So let me finish what we were saying. So there's a very strong connection between Honduras and New Orleans.
Sister cities. Or sister country city.
Right. So Tegucigalpa and New Orleans are sister cities. So anyway, so long story short is that Ramon was thrown off of a roof. I was an ER doc at the time. I was also an infectious disease doctor because there were tensions were running high amongst undocumented people. Long story short, Ramon ends up in my ER, and just by habit, I just test everybody for HIV because I'm an HIV doctor, and he tested positive. So now Ramon's been my patient for some 20 years, and I've had a pleasure of seeing him grow his family, now having grandchildren. And the whole story kind of revolves around Ramon's experience as an undocumented individual, living in New Orleans, being a very hard construction worker, being a person who's raised a family here. He's raised children. Their children are raising children now. Obviously, his children and their grandchildren are citizens of the U.S., but he's not. And he's a person who's living with HIV. Now, one of the well kept secrets in our medical society or history or whatever is that HIV care, when the law was passed in the early 90s that we were going to start covering for HIV as a kind of, I'm sorry that Reagan effed up so much in the 80s, let's make it right in the 90s, and still up into 2020s, is this law called Ryan White law, which is basically protects people living with HIV and gives them full access to medications and labs and doctor's appointments or whatever.
Which by the way, I'm sorry, which by the way is a check on the spread of these things. Like, it's not even necessarily coming from anybody's heart.
100%. We would see way more HIV. We have been stuck at 1.2 million people having HIV in the US for about 20, 30 years. That number would be much higher if we allowed people to basically live their lives with fully unvetted viral loads. In other words, they have viral loads. They're not being checked by medications, and they would just be doing what humans do. You know what humans do? Humans have sex, and people would have sex. They would be transmitting HIV, and we would have more than 1.2 million cases. So yes, 100%. Now, what's going on now is that Medicaid cuts are going to come as a result of the One Big Beautiful Bill. And once Medicaid cuts happen, a lot of people got moved off Ryan White once Medicaid expanded. So if you were a state like in Louisiana that expanded Medicaid, you got moved off Ryan White and you got given, and you were enrolled into Medicaid. What's going to happen now?
Sorry, I hate to do it again. This is another giving the devil his due, but shout out to John Bel Edwards on that one. I hate John Bel Edwards for a lot of reasons. One of the best things he ever did as governor. Just Bobby Jindal refused to do so.
Listen, I mean, Bobby Jindal thought he was going to be president. He was tanned, rested, and ready. Peace out.
He was ready to go. He was also cringe,
most cringe
beyond all.
You guys are listening to this. Just look up Bobby Jindal. What a cringe dude he was. I mean, the fact that he was the governor of the state of Louisiana and whitened his Louisiana portrait. He's a person of Asian Indian descent, mm-hmm. And he took if you look at him and look at his portrait, he whitened himself. Anyway, John Bel Edwards came in on day one, said I'm expanding Medicaid, and you know what? He did. He totally did. Anyway, so once Medicaid was expanded in states like Louisiana, we were able to move people off of Ryan White, and they were able to get all their health care through Medicaid, and that worked beautifully. So for people that were undocumented who are unable to get Medicaid, they still had Ryan White to lean on. So the problem is this now, is that now once we are going to see the elimination of Medicaid for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people after these cuts happen after 2026. Oh, look how convenient it was. It was after the 2026 elections. I wonder why. Like, they were worried that it was the big, beautiful bill that was going to do them in. No, it was everything else. Epstein files, Iran war, everything else that's making, Trump unpopular. But after these cuts actually take effect, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be off Medicaid, and they're going to have to come back onto Ryan White. And since then, there have been laws that have been made that are restricting people who are undocumented to be able to access these monies. So we are likely going to be losing a lot of undocumented peoples. And so in the article that I wrote, I talk about a conversation. Now I'm having to do telemedicine with a lot of my undocumented people, especially over the course of the last couple months when ICE was in New Orleans. We're not seeing much of ICE, I think, right now, but now everybody's just kind of moved over to telemedicine because obviously they're not going to leave their houses if they don't have to, especially to come to downtown New Orleans to come to my clinic. And so in one of these visits, when he asked me about this big, beautiful bill, how it was going to be affecting him, if Ryan White was going to be available to him, I said no, it's unlikely, but we don't know. And when he asked how much his medication is, and I told him, he gasped because it was a tremendous amount of money. It's largely because the U.S. government refuses to negotiate with big pharma. Right? If they negotiate with big pharma and got decent prices like the rest of the world did, instead the U.S. government pays full price for these medications.
I would even say that it's an inflated price because they will subsidize, but they won't negotiate. So, that's a whole different episode, a whole different
conversation. Yes,
but I would say that I would just say specifically, and again, I'm going to repeat myself. We pay more than what the full price would be because we subsidize without negotiating, which means we will spend money to pay these exorbitant prices without saying you need to keep these prices at a certain level. And I think that causes the price to go up.
100%. So the whole idea of the Imperial Health Boomerang is leaning on Emile Cesaire's idea of what the Imperial Boomerang was. He was looking at it in the terms of physical violence, and I'm looking at it from the perspective of health violence. And that is and in this article, what I'm trying to tell other physicians is you may not be an HIV doctor. We're going to be a low-hanging fruit. Like that's the first to go. Okay. Mm-hmm. But once other doctors start to see and it starts to affect them, right, that they need to recognize that the Imperial Health Boomerang predicts what our colleagues saw in Africa, in Asia, and South America, how their programs were immediately cut by that evil Satan named Elon Musk. They were cut immediately. And once those programs were cut, all of a sudden, patients, people, clients did not have access to their health care like they ordinarily would. And my colleagues all of a sudden did not have jobs, right? And so once PEPFAR and USAID got cut, that was it. People came back to the U.S., they had to leave their posts, and the people that were there are now having to fend for themselves. The governments are now having to fend for themselves. The Imperial Health Boomerang predicts that we're going to see the same thing here. And so I am asking physicians and public health practitioners and colleagues and nurses and anybody who's in the health field,
or anybody who cares about the medical system,
anybody
in the United
who
States.
cares, is that you need to start going through the grieving process now. You need to start going and not
and just do something. We got to do something about it.
Right, Kubler-Ross's, like there is, because you need to, like, for me, the grieving process vacillates between anger, right? Not disbelief. I predicted this early on. In fact, I wrote this article to predict what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So it's anger and finally coming to terms with it. I haven't come to terms with it. And as you could see, I'm still very, very angry because we as physicians are going to see unprecedented pain. And it's that pain. It's that the early deaths. We grew up in a country. We grew up in a world, right? That either between philosophy or religions or whatever it is, all right? Somebody who grew up in a very Jewish home who's now proudly atheist, right? Anti-Zionist, proudly atheist, who believes in the sanctity.
You can be, by the way, there are Zionist atheists and there are anti-Zionist Jews out there as well.
I'm an anti-Zionist Jew atheist. Or no, hang on.
There are religious Jews that are anti-Zionist as well. You know,
I know. I'm
not trying to check you or whatever, but I'm just throwing it out
anti-Zionist Jew-theist. There you go. I'm an anti-Zionist Jewtheist, right?
Yeah.
Okay, here's the point that I'm making. All right.
Yeah.
As
absolutely.
an anti-Zionist Jewtheist, right?
Jewtheist.
Religion doesn't mean anything to me. Jewish culture does. Anti-Zionist
course,
Jewish
yeah.
culture does, of course. That's what I grew up in. But here's the point that I'm making. It doesn't matter where you come from, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't matter. People come to me all the time. They're like, "Oh, you're an atheist? How do you have your morality?" I'm like, "I don't know, dude. I'm a human being, right? Like, I care about humans, right?" But the point is that the thing that we care most about, or at least we're taught to care the most about, the lessons that I got growing up in life, is that we care about the sanctity of human life. That's why for a second I could give the anti-abortionist at least 20, 30, 40 years ago, I could hear possibly where obviously now we know it's all about control and it's not about human life.
That ship has sailed. Like if you're anti-abortion, then you're you cannot be for like the being anti-abortion for other people. It's a personal thing.
Right. So the point here is this: is that if you truly care about the sanctity of life, you would care about these cuts that are coming down the line.
You would be anti-war as well, by the way.
You'd be anti-war as well, of course. I mean, what, 160 some odd girls, children that we did a double tap on
the first day, on the very first day.
Day one, and they were like, "Oh my, well, how did we do this? We need another 1.5 trillion dollars to, we can't even pass an audit." So ultimately what I'm getting to, Jeff, is that we as people of conscience, but particularly doctors, physicians, healthcare workers, public health practitioners, however you see yourselves, because it doesn't matter what field you're in. As Jeff will tell you, somebody who's a teacher and now who's a labor worker, like they're going to come after. There's Jenga buildings. They have Jenga. Every segment in society, every sector of society, be it finance, be it banking, be it education, be it labor, be it real estate, doesn't matter. Be it health, be it public health, be it medicine, doesn't matter. There's a Jenga building, and all they're doing is they're pulling out the blocks. They're pulling out the blocks. They're pulling out the blocks that ultimately will lead to a collapse.
Yeah, well, we got to land the ship, Markalain. So first off, thank you as always for joining us on.
We didn't even get to measles.
You know what? We got to talk again real soon.
I guess you're gonna have to come. Let me come back, dude. There's so much.
Buddy, you are always welcome on the show. You are so always welcome on the show anytime you want. Like you've texted me and told me that you felt bad about inviting yourself on or whatever. I'm just like, dude, I want you to do that.
No, you invite me on. I don't invite myself on. No.
All right. Jeff, well, you're permanently invited 100%. But we got to land the ship.
I know. I let me just say, and let me come back to this, okay? And I know we need to end. Two very significant things happened in the public health world last week, and we could talk about it the next time. One is that the CDC was found to be hiding positive data on vaccines. And two, the state of Utah is now vaccinating kids for measles at earlier ages. The sweet spot is 12 months, but the spot that they're doing it now at 6 months, they're giving them MMRs. And the reason why they're doing that is that the outbreaks are so bad in Utah, they have to change the recommendations that are consistent with resource poor countries. So we are now following recommendations in the US that resource poor countries have to do because measles is so endemic in their countries.
Yeah, so you're going to have to stay tuned for part 2 for that one. So join us next week when we talk to Markalain Dery about that. In the meantime, you have been listening to Good Morning Comrade on WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. Check us out every Monday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time, not Eastern Time. WHIVLP New Orleans 102.3. We love you. Bye-bye.